It is 6:30. Let's do this. All right. If you're not aware of what's going on in the news, you might be living on a different planet. So a few weeks ago, we did this talk on the immune system, and we had some troubles. There was a little bit of in and out, and a lot of people said that they couldn't really read the screen. So we're in a different room. We have a better signal. We've kind of redone the slides so that it's easier to read, and you'll see less of me and more just slides. But we think it's a good time to really talk about the immune system. If you're watching the mainstream media, you're not going to get the straight story. You're going to get the exaggerated story. We've had this big shutdown. People ask me, Doc, are you worried about this COVID-19? And I said, well, I'm going to be 58 years old next month, and that means that I've lived through 57 cold and flu seasons, and this one's not going to be any different. And every year, unfortunately, people die from the flu. COVID-19 is no different. People that are immune suppressed, people that have many comorbid conditions, they have lung disease, they have heart disease, they have diabetes, they have immune issues. Those people that are at death's door are going to have this be a complication, and many will die. That's no different than ever. Now we have most of the numbers in from Italy, and so we learned from that the 2017 flu epidemic that was in Italy is much worse than this season. And so we're starting to get numbers in, we're starting to learn. A few months ago there was fear because we didn't know. Well, now we do know, and so we need to get back to normal life. This was just another flu. Yeah, it's a little different than others, but the result is no different than others. Every year people unfortunately pass away from the flu, but 99% of the people are unaffected, and that's the same this year. So I wanted to talk a little bit again about the immune system. We're using Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai as our source for most of this information. Anybody can go on YouTube and watch this lecture given by Dr. Shiva. Once again, Dr. Shiva is an MIT PhD. He's studied biological systems engineering. He's very well versed in the modern immune system, and we're going to talk about what we mean by the modern immune system, meaning what we've learned possibly in the last 20 to 40 years about the immune system, but what is still taught in schools today. So let's get started. All right, the modern immune system. Now, I don't know, can we see this up here? The theory of the modern immune system, back in 1915, this theory of the immune system, and Dr. Shiva refers to it as the two-box system. Back in 1915, so over 100 years ago, 105 years ago, this was taught in medical schools. It was updated slightly in 1950, and it's been the same immune system that's been taught since 1950. So what's being taught today is 70 years old. And even in medical, or in chiropractic school where I went, it was this same system that was taught, the two-box system. So let's talk a little bit about what that two-box system is. All right? So the first part of the immune system is called the innate immune system. All right? And the other box is called the adaptive immune system. So let's talk a little bit about the difference. So a virus or a bacteria comes in, and the first part of the immune system that kicks in is the innate immune system. It's also called the non-specific immune system. Dr. Shiva, in his speech, referred to it as the infantry. So you send the infantry in with a bunch of guns and they start shooting. So I think everybody's heard of white blood cells, your immune system, the non-specific or innate system kicks in, and this is your macrophages, your neutrophils, your dendritic cells, and they go in and they start fighting right away. And this is your first line of defense, meaning your eyes, ears, nose, throat, skin, gut, all those things. That's where the white blood cells go to town, fighting right away. And so the time frame is the first 3 days. You've got this initial attack that's mounted by the innate immune system. All right? Then, this innate immune system communicates to the adaptive immune system, and the adaptive immune system kicks in, but it takes about 3 days to get going. Now you got this is your T cells and your B cells. This is your antibodies, okay? So the virus comes in, the adaptive system is triggered, takes about 3 days, and it starts to build antibodies. This is called the specific. It's a specific response where it's building a specific antibody, and it usually takes about 3 days to kick in. Okay? Now, the difference with a vaccine. So you've got your innate system and you've got your adaptive system, and the vaccine comes in here. The vaccine is designed to kind of trick the immune system into creating this antibody response. Okay? What they want is to make antibodies. So somewhere along the line they decided that getting measles or getting chicken pox was a bad idea, and they wanted to trick the immune system in and kind of come in here and get those antibodies to be created without you having to get the disease. So in theory, that's what they do. They measure that response by the antibodies. All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So this is the 2-box system that is taught. I was taught it in chiropractic school. The medical doctors are still taught today about this 2-box system. So here's what they've learned in the last 40 years or so. All right. So the interferon system is a system that this is kind of disturbing to me. Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai talked about that they actually discovered the interferon system, the IFN. They actually discovered it in the late 50s, early 60s, and they started to learn more about it. And so the fact that it's still not being taught in medical schools is disturbing, because it's been around for a while. And so what they learned initially is that there was alpha and beta cells, and what these systems do is it works with this system. So when you get an antigen coming in, a virus is called an antigen, this innate system, it kicks in the interferon system and the adaptive system. This takes 3 days, but this goes right to work, and this system helps to keep this system in check. It's a very, very important part of the whole antibody thing, because what happens sometimes is with the adjuvant comes in and it hyperstimulates the immune system, and if you're not involving the interferon system that keeps this system in check, then you get autoimmune, and we're going to talk more about that a little bit later. But also in the last 20 years, they've discovered that there's even more of the interferon system. They call it the gamma and the lambda, and these are very important in proper immune function. This system is not even being taught, but it's part of the immune system. Now, the adaptive system communicates back to the interferon system and to the innate system so that there's a proper immune response. They're communicating, they've found out. And this research has been heavily done in the last 20 years, so that's why we call it the modern immune system. Very important part of that. All right, now, there's a whole nother system that's part of your immune system, and that is this microbiome, or the gut. Now, when you think about how many cells is in the human body, there's actually more bacteria and more viruses in our body than we have human cells. And sometimes this is disturbing to people when I teach this, that we literally have 10 trillion bacteria, and some people call it, or are saying there's about 100 trillion viruses in our body, and there's some debate about this, but it's pretty much understood by all these researchers that there's much more non-human cells in us than there are human cells, and this is all part of this microbiome, or the gut health, that's very important to our immune system. I like to listen to a doctor named Dr. Zach Bush, MD, and you can, if you're taking notes, you can look him up and listen to some of his lectures on YouTube, where he has really done a lot of research on the microbiome, or the gut, and how important it is to have good gut health, and that it affects the function of the brain quite a bit. So this microbiome, instead of just the two-box system that's taught, we have the interferon system, and now we understand the microbiome system is a huge part of our immune system. So it talked about the ratio of bacteria in the gut is very important. And so they're starting to do studies where they have people that have gut problems, that they have health problems, immune problems, as they're doing studies on the ratio of bacteria, and finding that if they can improve that ratio, that they improve health. And they've actually done studies with autistic children with this gut health, and they've seen big jumps in their behavior and their condition. Now, there's a fifth system, which is the neural system, which is interesting because chiropractors, the chiropractic profession actually started officially in 1895, and chiropractors have been teaching since 1895 that the neural system, the brain and spinal cord and peripheral nerves, has a huge influence on immunity. And we've been attacked for saying that. And what's interesting is that in the last 20 years, it's proven, the science has proven, that the chiropractors were right all along. And so we're a little bit excited about that. When I first watched this lecture given by Dr. Shiva, I was actually cheering and screaming at my phone. I was so excited that here's an MIT PhD that is agreeing with chiropractic philosophy. And basically what that means is the neural system has a huge influence on the innate, the interferon, the adaptive, and the microbiome. That they've found now that there's direct communication with all those systems, and that the neural system is actually coordinating the function of the other systems. So it's a huge part. A lot of people call it the neural immune system. So there's direct communication going on between the gut and the brain, influencing the function. There's direct communication going on between the microbiome and the adaptive system, and the interferon system and the innate system. And then there's direct communication with the neural system and all these. So there's all this intercommunication. It's a very complex system. And when we mount an immune attack, an immune response on whether it's bacteria or virus, it's a very, very sophisticated response. Not just the adaptive and the innate system, but it's a very sophisticated response. And Dr. Shiva even said in this lecture that he's not going to be surprised if they find other systems that are also in there, and as they're continuing to learn more about the immune system and this sophisticated response. Now, some of the questions about natural versus vaccinated immunity. So a lot of times we have the mainstream media and big pharma that wants us to believe that the absolute best way to build immunity is to do the vaccines, that the vaccines are what builds immunity. But now that you see this model, that's a 5-part model, and the sophistication that it entails, to think that we can come in here and trick the immune system and use an adjuvant. The adjuvant is what, if we're using a kind of a fake virus, a dead or live or attenuated, they call it, so it's changed genetically. So it doesn't create the kind of response that you get when you do the normal immune response. And so it's kind of naive to think that with this very sophisticated immune system, that just measuring one variable in one part, so 1/5 of the immune system, you're measuring one variable to say that you've just built immunity. It's very naive. But when you talk about natural versus vaccinated immunity, the natural immunity is the true response where you get lifetime immunity. So for those people that were born before 1960, they had the measles and they have lifetime immunity. To this day, you can check their titers and they have the antibodies to measles, whereas with the vaccination immunity, they keep saying you need to get more and more boosters. It was 2, now it's 3, and they're saying, the more the merrier. And people are still fully vaccinated. People are getting measles. The same with mumps. Mumps is actually even worse. That people that were vaccinated get mumps all the time. So it's not the same, and that trying to shortcut the immune system, it just doesn't work long term. Now, the autoimmune responses, we talked a little bit about that before, is that when you're coming in here and you're trying to trick the immune system and you're not involving the interferon system, then the adaptive immune system goes unchecked and it can get out of control and cause autoimmune diseases. And so this is where you're talking about things like MS, arthritis. What's the kind of I just lost my mind. Rheumatoid arthritis, MS, these kinds of things. The leading cause of one of the autoimmune diseases is vaccines, and it's an autoimmune disease that attacks your nervous system. And Guillain-Barré syndrome. Thank you. I'm losing my mind. So the Guillain-Barré syndrome is an autoimmune response from the flu shot, and so you got to be aware of that. So autoimmune diseases are at an all-time high in 1989 and 1990s is where they tripled the recommended doses of vaccines, and since then autoimmune diseases have tripled as well. Then with the herd immunity was a term that started back in the 1920s, 1930s, where they were following measles, where they found out that if a certain percentage of the population had measles, that there were other people that were just immune to it that hadn't gotten it, and they called that herd immunity. But now the pharmaceutical companies have kind of grasped hold of that herd immunity, and they said, if we can vaccinate, initially they said we need to vaccinate about 75-80% of the population to gain herd immunity through vaccination. But then they upped that number to 90, and now they've upped it again to 95%. They think that they should vaccinate 95% of the population to achieve herd immunity. And what they're going to find is it still doesn't work because the vaccines are just cheating the immune system. When you think about it, there's about 170,000 immune suppressed individuals. And what they're saying with the herd immunity is they want to vaccinate 300 million people to protect the 170,000 that are immune compromised. It would make a lot more sense scientifically if you did things to strengthen the 170,000 rather than putting 300 million people at risk. But that's not a profitable business model, but force vaccinating 300 million people is a lot more profitable, and so that's the route that they go. And that's a shame. But the other thing that we learn about the vaccines is that they've done no risk assessment There's no studies that they've done, you know, the gold standard, the double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. They don't do those with vaccines. And they've passed laws that give them immunity to litigation, and then they've passed laws to call them biologics and not drugs so that they don't have to do the testing as well. So Jonas Salk was the one that made the polio vaccine back in the 50s, and he didn't do any risk assessment at all. All he was wanting to do is make sure that it was creating antibodies, and he said, okay, we're good, it's creating the antibodies, but they did no risk assessment. So when you take 300 million people and you force vaccinate them, you're going to have a certain percentage of people that have autoimmune diseases. You're going to have a certain percentage of people that have bad reactions, because there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all medication. Never has been, never will be. And so really, if we were scientific, we would think of ways to protect that 170,000 people rather than vaccinate 300 million. And it's the same with this coronavirus that we're dealing with right now. Rather than shut the whole country down and take the kids out of school, it's just ludicrous to do that. What they should have done is, like they do every flu season, is they tell the elderly and the aged, the immune compromised to stay in. But this year they decided to go the route of shutting the country down and quarantining, and now they're talking about how it's going to come back around in August, and the reason that is because they shut the country down, and instead of us getting herd immunity by 80% of the population being exposed to the virus, now we didn't get herd immunity because they had to stay in our houses, and it is probably going to come back around in August. The good news is it's still just a virus, and it's no different than any other virus as far as 1% of the population is at risk. But instead of us getting through this in a few weeks like normally would happen, now they're going to prolong it and have it be a greater problem. And this information comes from epidemiologists that understand how viruses work, and they're saying, yeah, it's just all over the world, there's epidemiologists saying this is crazy to quarantine over a flu virus. Now, we talked about risk assessment, herd immunity, autoimmune response. I think we've covered everything. Please understand that with this immune system, it is much more complex than what is understood and taught generally. It's a 5-box system. Dr. Shiva himself said he wouldn't be surprised if there's even more that they discover as they continue to learn. There are actually solid research out there that says you can improve this system. There's lots of ways. So like the one thing that is a problem is dirty air, dirty water, and dirty food. Those things, those kinds of things is what's causing a lot of the immune problems. We need to eat better. The one thing that we know is that sugar suppresses immune function. And so if you stay away from sugar at these times of year, you can increase immune function. Also, vitamin C. For years we've known vitamin C is very good for immune function. Vitamin D3 is an antimicrobial. It actually boosts immune function as well. I know a lot of people have gotten censored saying things like this boosts immune function, but then you find out that there's a lot of research that backs that up. Also, vitamin A actually improves cellular function in that it strengthens the cell walls so that the virus can't even penetrate. They've done studies in African nations where you have malnourished children that are dying of measles, and they go in and they do nothing but give them vitamin A, and the children improve. And so even in these severely malnourished children, vitamin A alone helps them survive the measles. In the United States, there hasn't been a measles death in 20 years. And the death that was cited was in an immune suppressed person. So vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc is very good at helping this, helping the immune system fight viruses. Iodine is very good. You can look on Dr. Brownstein's website, a medical doctor that talks about natural ways to fight viruses. Chiropractic has been proven to improve immune function. We talked about the neural system that's part of the 5-box system directly affects immunity. And so people that are getting regular chiropractic adjustments, their immune system functions on a higher level. So very, very wise to take care of your spine and nervous system, because that improves immune function. So thank you for tuning in. Is there any questions that people have that needs to be answered? We're going to post this lecture on our YouTube page channel, and so this will be on there from now on the YouTube channel. So thanks for tuning in tonight. We love and appreciate everybody here at Arizona Life Chiropractic Center, and we're excited to serve the community and help us get through this pandemic. Thank you.